meeting. I'd like to call the August 18th, 2016 meeting of the Board of Harbor Commissioners to order. And so, Patrick, would you like to call roll?
Yes. Jim Sloan.
Here.
Bill Spicer.
Here.
Betsy Kramer. Here. Stephen McIntosh.
Here.
Merritt McRae.
Here.
Lang Sly.
Here.
Thank you. All present.
All right. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, no changes this evening.
Okay. So this is a point where we would take public comment for things that aren't on the agenda, but I see we don't have a lot of public in the audience, so we'll move on to the approval of the minutes.
I just have one observation about the minutes. Jeanette's not here, but I was quoted as saying about the suggesting that the moorings be inspected. That isn't quite what I said. I said I hope that the minds would be kept open on it, and Mr. Kronman assured me that that would be so, but I didn't make a flat statement the way it's.
Where was it? Well, here's the minutes. It was under. Okay, let's take.
But that's what would be my.
Well, maybe we
observation on
can
it.
see if we can find it and address it. Oh, annual mooring report here. Yeah, Asset Department to continue. Is this it?
Yeah, that's it.
To continue testing the
Right.
bacteria?
I-
Why don't we say,
To keep an open mind about testing, and Mr. Kronman assured me that that was being done.
right,
I think the word was consider, something like that. Or,
Yeah.
And I did assure you that that's correct, that we would keep an open mind to that given
But-
environmental
But
circumstances.
it says that I basically said,
Right,
and
right.
that's not what I do.
Understood.
Or did.
I read that. But how should we amend it so that we can approve it as amended? It right now reads, Commissioner Kramer asked the department to continue testing bacterial levels. Should we say?
Kramer suggested that the department keep an open mind on the testing.
Okay, department to continue to keep an open mind on bacterial level testing.
Okay, so, yeah, if you want to make a motion, we'll amend the minutes to reflect that when we'll correct them.
Right. So what we'll do is, you got that?
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so we have, would someone like to make a motion to?
I would make a motion to approve the minutes with that amendment.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions?
Staying.
Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah, I would be on record as an abstention, I guess.
Right. Exactly.
You want to speak?
Okay, the next thing is the appointment of our new commissioner.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I'm happy to introduce Langston Sly as our new Harbor Commissioner being seated tonight. Just by way of background, he's been involved in a lot of business items. Lang was the founding partner and president of Langley Associates in Seattle, doing office and retail development and developing industrial products. Prior to that, he worked for IBM and Wells Fargo, worked for another outfit called West Coast Acquisitions in a joint venture with BPG Properties, which is a Philadelphia-based pension fund investor. He's been board and member of 4 condominium homeowners associations in Washington, also in California. Has a degree, master's in business administration, finance from Georgia State University, and he's a sailor and former member of the Oceanside Yacht Club. And so he comes to us with extensive financial and budgeting experience, sailing experience, and the smartest thing is when he wants to go sailing now, he rents the boat from Skip over at the sailing center instead of owning one with a slip here in the harbor. So he's got that one figured out too. So anyway, with that, I'll introduce Lang Sly as our new commissioner.
All right, well, thank you and welcome.
Scott, thank you.
Would you like to say a few words? Or
I don't know enough about the commission's business yet to say a few words, but I will say that I think this is the best commission job in the city. So,
I think we agree. All right. Moving ahead to the director's report, department updates.
Mr. Chair, in terms of council actions, the council found it in the city's best interest to waive the formal bid procedure as authorized by the municipal code in certain situations, and authorized the purchasing manager to issue a purchase order for 8 more Luke parking stations in an amount not to exceed $90,000. And these stations are intended to be installed, new ones in the Ledbetter parking lot, so that'll be a new thing there. And then we're going to add a few to the Harbor West parking lot to just have a little more access for the customers. Additionally, the Council Ordinance Committee forwarded to Council an ordinance that Mick's been working on, amending the municipal code to extend the time allowed for a slip permittee to replace a vessel in his slip that is, say, stolen, destroyed, or sold, and find a new boat for that slip. Currently, the limit is 120 days, and so the proposal is to open that up to 180 days to loosen it up a little so people have a little more time to find the next boat of their dreams. And the second half of that ordinance is to eliminate the lottery list assignment fee for slips that are assigned from the Waterfront Department lottery waiting list. And as you may remember, this happens when we have a slip lottery and then someone gets, typically it's with like a 20-foot boat, and they have to pay the fee going in, getting the boat, and it's kind of stifled the activity a little bit. So again, this is a loosening measure to kind of get the business flowing a little bit better in that regard. And Mick can clarify that better than I can if you have any questions. Carl and I met in early August with Colonel Kirk Gibbs of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He's the new commander for the LA District, which handles 14 maintenance dredging projects from Morro Bay to San Diego. And also the LA District oversees civil works and military projects throughout the state of Arizona and part of southern Nevada as well, including dams and all sorts of civil works projects. The 3-year contract with our dredging company, Pacific Dredge, that we've had for the last 3 years has expired, and the Corps intends to start the bidding process in September. So it's opportune time to meet with the Corps and discuss that. We believe the bid opening is scheduled for October. And hopefully it's Pacific Dredge again, because they did quite a good job this last time around under very harsh circumstances. Carl and I expressed our satisfaction with Pacific Dredge performance, and as well as our deep gratitude for locating about, I put in the report, $1 million. I believe it's closer to $1.5 million that the Corps was able to find in both extra work plan money and emergency funding when we had so many swells bringing all the sediment into the harbor. And Colonel Gibbs did confirm that there's $2.6 million in the President's budget for FY17 dredging for the harbor. So tentative items for next month's meeting, September, will be the fiscal year-end 2016 budget review, look at how we did, and a possible lease amendment with West Marine and some other lease activity. So that concludes my report unless there are any questions.
Any questions or comments? All right, I just wanted to clarify one point. In the report here, it talks about vessels being donated, stolen, destroyed, or otherwise. That would lead you to believe that it was under some circumstances not under the owner's control, except for the donation. But it also includes any vessels that are sold. Is that correct? That's what you mentioned.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you.
That's actually the driver. The rest are in case those things happen, it also applies.
Right. So,
That's by far the exception.
right. Okay, thank you. Anything else? All right. Moving on to the facilities management report.
Good evening, Chair Sloan and Commissioners. Tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about some smaller capital improvements that take place at the waterfront. Capital improvements in the city normally cost over $100,000 and have a useful life of over 5 years. We do a tremendous amount of smaller projects that cost less than $100,000 but still have a long and useful life. This year we identified 29 minor capital improvement projects. We completed 23 out of those 29, 79%. We do have a performance objective of 80%. We didn't quite meet it this year. We've met it the last 3 years in a row. It's always been a challenging objective to meet. We set the bar kind of high, and in the beginning of the year, it seems like we'll make it easily, and towards the end of the year, we realize a lot of things came up, and it winds up being pretty challenging. There's a full list of the projects in your staff report, but I was going to go over a handful of them today just to give you an example of the staff's demonstration of their trade skills, creativity, and versatility. I'll walk through each of these one at a time. Rebuilding end ties. Marina 3C was rebuilt this year. It used to be 4 feet wide. It was built in the 1980s. We widened it to 6 feet wide. That's the Boating and Waterways standards for the Department of Division of Boating and Waterways guidelines. We've done all of the end ties on the north side of the harbor, Marinas 2, 3, and 4. We're going to finish with Marina 3A this year and work on Marina 2 end ties next year, Marinas 2, B, and C. Once we finish that, then all of them will be compliant with the guidelines from the state. So we're looking forward to getting that project finished. We have incrementally gone around all the harbor and upgraded our guardrails to make them code compliant. If you look kind of on the left side of the screen, you'll see the guardrail by the Marina 3 gate. It's got 2 horizontal bars, a pretty big gap in between it. And every time we walk by and see little kids looking over, we get a little bit nervous and are afraid they're going to fall into the harbor. On the right-hand side, where you have the vertical pickets, 4 inches wide, those are code compliant. We finished those from Marinas, from the pillars to Marina 2, now Marina 2 to Marina 3. We'll do Marina 3 to 4 next year, and 4 to the end of the harbor, and that'll make the entire guardrail around the harbor code compliant, with the exception of on the breakwater, where if we were to do that, we would probably have the thing knocked over by all the debris that washes over during large storms and swells. So there's a consideration to make that one a little bit different. This is a unique situation we have. This is the Marina 1 East restroom. It was constructed completely separate from the rest of the docks. It's a Q figure you're looking at. And what happened over the years is when we first installed this restroom, it floated much higher than the rest of the dock. So the divers went in and they cut off a bunch of foam, and it settled into place pretty good for a while. Then it's gradually sunk over the years. It was about a 4-inch difference recently, last year. So one thing we did is we used our dive crew and went down and put in some supplemental flotation and brought it all back up to just about level with the rest of the docks. People don't realize it, but it's really challenging to have 2 separate docking systems that aren't attached to make them have equal freeboard. We brought it up. We have this little red rubber barrier for people to walk over, so it's no longer a trip hazard. And most people won't realize it, but it's an excellent demonstration of our dive staff and their capabilities. Another example of our staff's creativity is this trailer. We rebuild many of the wooden fingers on 2, 3, and 4 in our maintenance yard. And this particular trailer was something they developed, about 9 years ago, whereby you can build them in the yard, pull it through the launch ramp, and launch these new docks into the harbor. It's a push-me-pull-you trailer, we call it. And this saves us a tremendous amount of money, because normally you'd have to use a crane every time for these things. So, and we've probably built 50 docks or more by now using this device. We've done 10 fingers in Marina 4. That's an objective we set. We finished Marina 2 a few years ago. We'll do 10 fingers at a time until Marina 4 is done. And it kind of winds up with you wind up with an almost brand new marina for an incredibly less price than you would if you built it out of concrete and contracted it out. It's a good example of the staff's efficiency. We have 5 pump outs in the harbor in 4 different locations. We received a grant from the Division of Boating and Waterways this year for about $70,000 to replace 4 of them. It really helps us meet our clean marine objectives, and encourage everybody to use these all the time. Something that's important to us around the harbor and out on Stearns Wharf is aesthetics. We have a couple of relic things out there. We have an old cannon that we used to fire frequently, and it was sat on a couple of old pillars, and staff rebuilt this little box. It looks like a cargo box. We've built these boxes over some of the backflow preventers and fire department connections, and it just aesthetically looks good. It kind of maintains that maritime theme. People seem to like it. One of our staff members, Nels Anderson, recently built a ship's wheel just outside of the picture there, and there's constantly people taking pictures in front of it with the harbor in the background. So I think people really appreciate that. Another improvement we made this year has to do with public safety. This is the foot of Stearns Wharf, just onto the beach, past the kiosk at the intersection of Cabrillo and State. We've had a lot of problems out there, some illicit activities going on for a long, long, long time. So staff went around and built this barrier around it so people can't get in there and do bad things. It's really helped with enforcement, cleaned up the area, and made it a lot nicer. It's just another example. People don't recognize or realize some of these small improvements make a big difference in enforcement and keeping the area safe. This is an objective we have every year. It's 300 deck boards. There's 4 acres of decking out on Stearns Wharf. We just arbitrarily set an objective of 300 deck boards a dozen years ago or more. This year we started documenting specifically where they're going and the different deck board types. We have roadway, we have walkway, and we have parking areas. So in a couple of years we're going to be able to determine what the replacement frequency is by deck board type, and that'll help us with our long-term planning and make sure that 300 deck boards a year is adequate. We maybe have to increase that or just proactively go and replace them in certain areas. We're doing that with our pile driving and a few other things. It's just a more proactive way to kind of plan these things out in the future. We think it's going to help us with our budgeting and getting this stuff done without allowing it to get too deteriorated. So finally, there were 29 minor CIPs identified for the fiscal year 2016. It's about average. We finished 23, just about met our objective. We spent about $317,000. That's about typical. It hovers right around $300,000 for these projects. We pay for them both out of either the Harbor Preservation Fund, which is our capital fund, and some of these are paid for out of our operating budget. It continues to be an effective way of getting some important projects finished using mostly staff time, and we feel it's an efficient use of our funds and really creates for long-lasting improvements at the waterfront. And that concludes my presentation this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Great work by you and the team. Any comments, questions? All right.
I'd just add what Jim said. Great work, all of it. Really tremendous. Thanks.
Moving on to harbor operations.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Well, this slide sort of tells it all. You can go into presentation mode. This slide sort of tells it all. It's around the corner, believe it or not. In less than 2 months, we'll be celebrating our 15th annual Harbor and Seafood Festival on Saturday, October 15th from 10 to 5. And for those folks who like this or love this celebration, including, I think, all of us, we've got it all again this year, the stuff that folks love. We have the fresh crab and lobster, boil them right there on the spot, pick them out, have your lobster boiled right there, oysters, barbecued albacore, paella, sea urchin uni, fresh fish tacos, Brophy Brothers clam chowder, and so much more. I would be going on and on if I was to name all the things there are to eat. And then there's great music. We have bands. We have 40-plus arts and crafts vendors, tall ship, Coast Guard cutter tours, touch tanks, free boat rides, maritime education booths, on and on and on. So this has become our particular signature event of the year of the 5 major events that we host. And you'll hear this again next month, but we want folks to, if they like this, to circle their calendar for October 15th, 10 to 5, the 15th annual, I can't believe we've been doing it that long, the 15th annual Harbor and Seafood Festival right in the commercial area of the harbor. If folks have any questions, they can email me or call me directly. I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we have a couple of websites you can go to get all the information. One of them is at harborfestival.org. That's harborfestival.org. Or on the city's website at santabarbaraca.gov/seafood festival. That's santabarbaraca.gov/seafood festival. And there's parking information, alternative transportation information on there, the list of all the activities and the locations and what have you. I think we're still, to a degree, populating the site, but it has a lot of information on there already, as does the harborfestival.org. Another sign that we're sliding from summer into fall is the fact that we just completed our annual King Harbor race from Santa Barbara to King Harbor in Redondo. This year we had a robust turnout of 90 sailboats. This started at noon on June 29th, and it was the 44th annual King Harbor race. And thanks to, this is unusual, we actually had breeze at the starting line this year. There were 10 knots of breeze, made for a quick reach to Anacapa Island and then for the downwind run to King Harbor. And boats had a beautiful sail all the way there. It was reported as a very, very successful event. And the winning time, the fastest elapsed time was a catamaran named the Go-Kart. owned by a gentleman named Chris Slagelman of King Harbor Yacht Club, made it in just under 7 hours from here to 81 miles down the way over the ocean into King Harbor. That's a pretty good clip. The overall winner on corrected times, and there are a lot of different classes of sailboats, was a Viper 830. I guess that's a 26-foot sailboat named the Warrior, and it was owned by a gentleman named John Seitz from Dana Point Yacht Club. But we had local winners too. Local standouts included Taxi Dancer Tom Parker, finished second in the Maxi division, and Captain Sluggo, Nina Yabsley, and Gruvaderci, and Menace, that's Deneen DeMarcos and Bill Daffron. The three of them swept the podium for Santa Barbara in the ultralight displacement C division, and second wind, Landon Nicolay, won the cruising class. And the complete results are available at the Yacht Club's website at sbycracing.org. That concludes my report this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions, except detailed questions about these classes of sailboats. I'll defer to the sailor among our management team, Carl Treiberg, and he can answer those for you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? All right. Moving right along here today. Okay, new business. Would you like to read the recommendation, please, Patrick?
Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend to the City Council approval of a 5-year lease agreement with one 5-year option with Neil and Judy Bruskin, a sole proprietorship, doing business as Mother Stearns Candy Company, at an average rent of $2,302 per month, or 10% of gross sales, whichever is greater, for a 392-square-foot retail space located at 219 Stearns Wharf, Suite B.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. This is the first of 3 leases up for your review this evening. As Pat just said, the business is it's Mother Stearns Candy Company. It's owned by Neil and Judy Bruskin. They assumed the lease through an assignment process back in May of 2006. And since that time, Mr. and Mrs. Bruskin have put in quite a bit of work to the facility. They've cleaned it up, and it's a great candy shop. And consequently, their sales have gone up over 74% in that time frame. They do a very robust business. It makes sense. Candy, Wharf, they kind of go together. As Pat told you, it's a 5-year initial term with one 5-year option. They pay on a seasonal basis, and we adjust it according to the cost of living on an annual basis as well. I should let you know that Mr. and Mrs. Bruskin are a tenant in good standing. They're always prompt with their payments. They're active in the Stearns Wharf Business Association. Actually, since I've been here, Mr. Bruskin has been the president of the Stearns Wharf Business Association, and he puts in a lot of time and effort putting that whole group together and keeping them running and putting on events out at the wharf to enhance the business and keep people coming out there, especially during this time of construction. So with that, that's my brief presentation on Mother Stearns Candy Company, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions, comments? Yes.
I have 2 questions. I noticed all 3 of the leases on the agenda tonight have options, and I wondered, how do you typically structure those options? What are the terms of the option? And secondly, if you know what the rate is that they're coming out of from this lease that's now 10 years old, relative to the proposed rate.
Commissioner Sloan, Commissioner Sly, I'll answer your last question first. Generally, what we do when we move into that next lease, we keep the rate. We might increase it just a little bit, but it's generally the same as what they end on, and then we start a new 5-year process where it increases accordingly. And your first question again was options. Generally, we move into a new 5-year term, and if there need to be adjustments made, depending on what they are, we'll consider those. But generally, the financial component just kind of flows into the next 5-year option, and it's almost as if it was a 10-year in a sense. It just keeps increasing as appropriate. So we try to keep them not too many changes to the lease unless warranted.
And these typically have CPI increases.
They do. All of our leases have a CPI increase on an annual basis. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sly, just to add to that, give you a little background information. Some of our really small leases, like offices and things, we typically do 5 years. These three we're looking at tonight are multi-tenant buildings. They're relatively small in square footage, so we'll do a 5 with a 5-year option. Much more beyond that, we're starting to look at what the tenant is going to put into the business in terms of construction improvements or whatever. So just for a plain old renewal like this, we'll usually just do what we did last time and do a 5 and a 5 at the same rate. Another thing to consider is, although it says they pay $5.87 a square foot for the candy company, they're always in, the candy company in particularly is almost always in percentage rent. So when it comes down to the end of the year, the amount of money they pay really ends up being a bit more than $5.87. So we don't monkey around too much other than the CPI with the base rents as we renew the lease, because what we're really looking for is the percentage rent. So I just wanted to add that.
Anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
Got one question, and it's perhaps a bigger issue, but I just wanted to ask now. How many proprietors sell tobacco products out on the wharf?
Commissioner Sloan, Commissioner Spicer, I believe, no, it is just the candy store. They're the sole purveyor of tobacco goods, and I don't think it's one of their larger sellers.
Well, and I guess one of the things that caught my eye is that it does have an exception where they're not allowed to sell the current trending of these products. And is that something you put in specifically?
That's correct. We put that in this time around just to avoid that temptation.
Great. Hats off. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Would someone like to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we pass this.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Looks like it passed unanimously. The next one is the lease agreement for Nature's Own, with Nature's Own. Mr. Healy, what do you read?
Certainly. That Harbor Commission review and recommend City Council approval of a 5-year lease agreement with one 5-year option with Nature's Own Gallery, Inc., doing business as Nature's Own, at an average initial base rent of $2,221 per month, adjusted seasonally for the 423 square foot space located at 217 Stearns Wharf, Suite C.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, the second lease on your agenda this evening is Nature's Own. And the Marshall family has owned Nature's Own via their family corporation since 1981. So they've been around for quite some time. The business is currently managed by Mr. John Marshall, and he staffs that store on a daily basis. Again, similar to the prior lease, this is a 5-year initial term with one 5-year option. It includes cost of living increases based on the Consumer Price Index. The primary specialty of Nature's Own is a store carrying shells, minerals, fossils, and related products. And they do have some secondary specialties as well. And this is a percentage rent lease. Again, and they too, Nature's Own is considered a tenant in good standing with the department, and they are active members as well in the Stearns Wharf Business Association, and they quite often volunteer their time and efforts and money and stock to promote events that take place out on Stearns Wharf. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on Nature's Own and the lease with the Marshall family.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Spicer.
Just real quick, are they usually a percentage rent? Do they come into that zone?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Spicer, they generally do not. They teeter at or near, and they pay on a seasonal basis. So in the summertime, they'll pay more when it's busy, and then when winter, it kind of slows down a little bit for seashells and things like that. They'll be on a lower, but it all ends up being the same amount as originally scheduled. So they kind of teeter. They might tip in depending on robust summer month.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Is there a motion for this? Yes.
I'll move to.
Okay.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. The last one we have tonight is a lease agreement with Deep Blue Sea. Mr. Healy, would you read the recommendation?
Yes, sir. A recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend City Council approval of a 5-year lease agreement with one 5-year option with John Marshall and Melissa Schumacher, doing business as Deep Blue Sea, at an average initial base rent of $2,248 per month, adjusted seasonally, for the 392 square foot space located at 219 Stearns Wharf, Suite C.
Thank you, Patrick. This particular lease is directly behind the candy store, and this is with Deep Blue Sea, the proposed lease with Deep Blue Sea, and again, Mr. John Marshall, but instead of the family, it is with John Marshall and Melissa Schumacher. John Marshall purchased Deep Blue Sea from Doris Ewing and the Ewing Family Corporation back in June, and assumed the lease, I should say, in June of 2002, so he's been there about 14 years. And he's happy to be there, and we're happy to have him. Again, it's a 5-year term with one 5-year option. Cost of living increases, same as our previous leases. His primary specialty with the store is carrying novelty items, gifts, souvenirs, and toys. And this is also a percentage rent lease. Similar to the last lease, which involves Mr. Marshall. He's a tenant in good standing, pays his rent on time, and he's an active member of the Stearns Wharf Business Association. And that concludes this lease, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. For our new commissioners, what happens from here when these leases, if these leases are approved, we will then schedule them for a future city council meeting. Generally, if they are approved 3 to 4 weeks out, because of the time frame it takes to put something on the city council's agenda, they'll review the lease, and from there, depending on the length, these are all 5 with 5-year terms, so an ordinance needs to be included. So city council will have to first introduce the item 1 week. The next week, they adopt it, and then 1 month after that, the lease becomes effective. So it is quite a process, and thankfully our tenants are patient people, and so are we. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Yes, Mr. Sly.
I noticed that all 3 of these leases have certain constraints on what they can sell, and I wondered if any of the tenants have exclusive rights to sell certain goods or services. Like one of these tenants couldn't sell coffee, for instance. Is there somebody has those rights on the pier?
Chair Sloan, Commissioner Sly, that's a great question. What we generally try to do is limit who sells what. We want all of our tenants to be successful. Obviously, with restaurants, they're going to sell a lot of the same food items. However, when it comes to novelty items, there are a few on Stearns Wharf. There's Old Wharf Trading Company, which is a very large space. I believe that was on last month's agenda. They sell a lot of knickknacks and novelty things, similar to Deep Blue Sea. So we do try and separate them enough to where each person kind of has a niche and can work that niche and be successful. There is going to be some overlap. I think there's always going to be overlap, but we do try and limit that. For something like this, generally he's not going to be selling coffee when you can go next door to Char West and get your coffee. So we kind of try to split it up so people have to go everywhere to get what they need, and everybody ends up in the positive.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, is there a motion to approve this?
I'll move. A second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, passed unanimously. All right, moving on to commission staff communications. Scott, is there anything?
Commissioner Sloan, Chair Sloan, nothing from staff this evening.
Anything from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Kramer.
I'm not sure whether this should be brought up at this point, since it's not on the agenda, but I mean, I think that the subject of the boat beaching on East Beach recently, and I'm not sure whether that should be discussed at this point or put off, and I have a suggestion, which maybe shouldn't be brought up either.
Well, why don't we start with that? Do you have an update?
I do, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Kramer. The boat was removed from the beach by Marburg at 4 o'clock today with all monies owed paid by the owner of the vessel.
Yeah.
That one is a done deal.
Right, I understand that. I was there, actually.
Okay.
Well, my comment is, I'm wondering whether there should be some arrangement whereby, I'm not sure how this would be done, that when a boat is beached, that there's a standing group of people, of boats that available to help tow it off. I was there for several times when they attempted to tow this off, and it may have been owner error. I don't know. It's awkward to say. But no one seemed to really know quite what to do or whom to contact and so forth. As I say, I was there from the morning after this beach and for several days and watching and listening without saying anything what was being said. So it occurred to me that it might be useful to have a roster of people willing to help.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kramer, if you'll allow me, maybe it would be helpful if I walk the Commission through the process and how we deal with these beached boats. The Harbors and Navigation Code provides, these are basically abandoned vessels at this point, especially because they present possible risks to public safety and to the environment. We tend to act quickly on them. Now, what does quickly mean? Quickly means we get a hold of the registered owner, if they're around, and oftentimes they are, and we provide them a list of salvors, the very thing you're referring to. We have a list of contract salvors who are capable of either disposing of the boat on the beach or pulling it off the beach if it's salvageable in that manner. There are a lot of little tricky elements that come in this, the granular stuff, if you will. You know, how is it laying in the sand? Has the keel cracked? Has the hull been breached? Is the integrity of the vessel such that if you do tow it offshore, is it not going to sink in the surf line and turn a $2,000 project into a $200,000 project? So we were very much aware of the process as it was going on. We were in touch with the registered owner and the Coast Guard and potential salvors on a twice-a-day basis since the boat went up on the beach Sunday. That's pretty much the protocol we use, but it's tricky. You got to be very, very careful when people, right-minded people, want to tow these boats back out to sea. And we were there. We were supportive of that because I don't want to go into too much detail, but it was a pretty beefy hull. And we thought that because sometimes we will step in and we'll step in with the Coast Guard and say, you know what? No, this is going to create more danger and more public hazard and cost more than it's worth. That didn't seem to be the case, so we went along with it. Well, they weren't able to get it off, and they finally gave up the ghost, and the owner paid Marburg to take it off the beach. But there are a lot of contingencies that go into each case.
Well, you basically answered my question that there is, in fact, a listing of people who are ready and willing and capable of towing it back. That I wasn't aware of.
Correct, and they all have the proper insurance, et cetera, so they've been entirely vetted, and that's the first thing we give to the registered owner when their boat goes on the beach and we have initial conversation with them.
Thank you very much. And my other question concerns seabirds. I heard from somebody from the Wildlife Care Network who's actively involved in rescuing seabirds, which I'm not particularly anymore, that it would be really helpful if there were more signage on Stearns Wharf concerning hooking of seabirds, and I said I would pass on the suggestion. I'm not sure what additional signage there can or should be, but I am passing it on. Thanks.
All right. Anything else? Then would someone like to entertain a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Okay.
I will second that.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's it. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.